This all took place in my home country of Brazil. My buddy had a friend called Antonio. I never met the guy personally, but everyone who had told me he was a really funny guy, and like most funny guys who are at least a little bit handsome, he was very popular with the ladies. One day, Antonio told my buddy that he had organized a date with a model. "A model?" said my friend. "You're serious? Anyone I've heard of?" "Maybe," said Antonio, who handed his phone over to my friend. Open on the screen was an OnlyFans page. The girl whose page it was didn't have that many images or videos uploaded, so it was obvious her page was pretty new, but my friend did recognize her immediately. She was a local woman called Isabella, young and absolutely gorgeous, one of the best looking girls he had ever laid his eyes on. In his words, she had a booty like an onion, it'd make a grown man cry. Antonio had met her in our small town and asked her for her contact information. Instead, she took his phone and opened up her OnlyFans page. From there, he became a follower. He sent her a DM and asked her out on a date. She said no at first, but Antonio was persistent and kept asking. Rather than reply using words, she sent back an image which was hidden behind a paywall, the equivalent of about $50. Antonio was a pretty wealthy young man, so, curious as he was, he paid the money and opened the message without a second thought, hoping for a raunchy picture. The image was just text, a time and address for their date. It also said to bring money to pay for dinner. Like I said, my friend knew who Isabella was, and knew that she already had a boyfriend, a mean filo de mai called Davy. Davy rolled with some really bad dudes, was into some shady shiz, and you could tell just by looking at the guy that you wouldn't want to mess with him. My buddy warned Antonio to be careful, to cut contact with Isabella, and not to go on this date with her. Antonio didn't listen, since Isabella told him that she was single, and that her and this Davy guy must have broken up. That evening, Antonio got dressed up and drove off on his moped to meet Isabella. Now my friend, being a man of culture, was of course a little bit curious himself about Isabella's online uploads. He decided to sign up on the site and became a follower of hers himself. It was only cheap to do so, the equivalent of a couple of bucks a month. Well, there weren't many pictures and videos to look through, but Isabella was clearly focusing on quality over quantity, and my friend wasn't disappointed with what he saw. He logged off around 11 PM and went to bed. That next morning, my friend sent Antonio a message, asking him how things went with Isabella. No reply. Antonio usually replied to his messages really quickly. Maybe things had gone well after all, and he was still with her. He waited until the afternoon. Still no reply. A tad unusual for Antonio, but maybe he was just getting a little afternoon delight. No. The days passed, and there was still no word from Antonio. My friend checked in with everyone who knew him, including his boss at work. Nobody had seen him since that night. People were starting to get worried. The authorities seemed to have little interest in helping find him, saying that Antonio was a grown man and had probably gone off traveling or something by himself since his moped was never found. Isabella continued posting on her account as normal, and since my friend was still following her, he decided to send her a DM, asking if she knew where Antonio was. If so, was he alright? Instead of text, she sent back an image, which he could unlock for $50. No words, just an image hidden behind a paywall. My pal didn't have a lot of money, but something told him he had to open it. He paid the money and opened the picture. It was a photo of a dirty shovel in close-up. The hand gripping it was obviously male. Behind it, he could make out a hole in the earth, large enough to fit a human inside. It was captioned, "What do you think?" My friend didn't want to believe it, but in his heart, he knew what had happened, and he knew he'd never see Antonio again. He tried desperately to get Isabella to reply to him via DM, but that was the last he ever heard from her too. She continued uploading content to her account, but both she and Davy left town shortly after Antonio vanished. Surely not a coincidence. It seemed like both of them were in on this together after all. So, what happened that fateful night? Scenario 1. Davy was using Isabella and forcing her to post images of herself online so he could make a little money. She was the face, and he was the one behind the messages, and lured Antonio into a trap. Scenario 2. Davy didn't know that Isabella was using the site, and when he learned that she was actually going on a date with someone, he flipped. Maybe Isabella, realizing that Antonio dressed well and must have had some money in his pocket, targeted him specifically. Maybe they held him up and he decided to fight back. Maybe they planned to do away with him from the beginning and take whatever money he brought in his pockets. Sadly, the investigators did very little to help. Davy had ties to the fuzz, so it's possible they intentionally brushed everything under the rug and told him and Isabella to skip town. Several months came and went, with neither Davy nor Isabella being seen around town at all. My friend continued to keep an eye on her page, hoping that a new clue would come to light. He thought that would be the end of it. Then, one night, he received a notification saying Isabella had uploaded a new photo. He logged in to check what it was. It was an image sent to all of her followers, titled, "My Final Post." He opened it. It was a blurry picture of Isabella in a dark, wooded area. Her eye was black, her face cut, and she looked absolutely terrified, her hands up near her face as if she was trying to protect herself. There was no caption to explain the image. Both the picture and her account were deleted shortly afterwards. Davy hasn't returned to our town since, and for our sakes, I hope he never does. A little while back, I started an OnlyFans account. I know what you're all thinking, but hey, I was single at the time, and I figured it was a pretty harmless way to earn a little extra dough. I started off by posting some tame stuff, and progressively got into uploading more mature images. Yeah, I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either. I lived with my parents at the time, so I had to be careful about making my content. Like I said, I wasn't ashamed, but I knew they wouldn't be as open-minded about it. As such, I always waited until they were out of the house before I took any pictures or videos, and I didn't tell any of my friends out of fear that it would somehow get back to my folks. It was very private business. After just a few months, I couldn't believe how much money I was making on the site. I'd amassed a sizable following and monthly income, so I decided to treat myself. My wardrobe was pretty old at that point, and I decided to buy some new clothes. I hit up a local store to pick out some new outfits. Now, it might sound strange to some of you, but when I got to the store, I started live streaming to my OnlyFans followers, talking to them about changing up my style and asking for their opinions on certain items. I'd often stream to my supporters through my private, for fans-only YouTube channel during the day. I thought this built a sense of community. A lot of them enjoyed seeing me go about my life, whether I was just out shopping, at a cafe, or just blogging from my apartment, and I'd reply to their comments and connect with them. For the most part, they were well behaved and respectful during those streams, and I started recognizing a few of their names. It was pretty wholesome. I made my way through the store, holding the camera in selfie mode, engaging with my fans. After about 20 minutes or so, I ended the stream. At some point during that evening, I logged onto my page. That's when I noticed a message from one of my regulars. "Thanks for wasting our time and money by lying to all of us. You never told us you had a boyfriend. Consider this the end of my support." I was confused. Boyfriend? Where'd he get that idea? Well, this guy was one of my biggest supporters, and I was really sorry to see him go, so naturally, I sent him a message. Hey, I am single, free as a bird. I don't know who told you I wasn't. Do you think I'm stupid or something? I'll admit it took me a couple of months to notice, but it's obvious you're with some guy all the time. I see him in the background of all of your streams. He was with you at the store today. What are you talking about? The dude in the green shirt. I feel really sorry for the guy, to be honest, dating someone who does what you do. I went back to check the recording of that day's stream, and sure enough, about 5 minutes in, over my left shoulder, there was a guy in a green shirt, walking quite close behind me. He was very tall, had a muscular build, looked to be in his late 20s, but already had dark circles under his eyes and thinning hair. Okay, well that didn't prove anything, just some guy behind me at the store. I continued watching the video, and yeah, the guy did seem to be behind me for most of it, popping up throughout as if he was following me, but surely that was just a coincidence. Still, my regular's message stayed in my mind. He said he'd seen this guy in multiple streams of mine. I went back and checked the previous stream that I'd done. It was of me at the mall. Nothing seemed out of place. Then I saw him. That same guy in that same green shirt, walking behind me in the distance. That stream had lasted 47 minutes, and you could see him behind me throughout it. Sometimes far, sometimes close, but always following me. The stream ended with me at a cafe, and the guy sitting down just a couple of tables away from me, all by his lonesome. The whole time, his dark eyes were watching me. I hadn't noticed him at all. Okay, so I started getting a little freaked out at this point. Obviously, this wasn't just a coincidence. I went back and checked more of my older streams. Videos of me in town, videos of me walking the dog at the park, chilling on the beach. In all of them, he was there, and in almost all of them, he was wearing the same green shirt. This man, who I had never seen before in my life, had been following me on what appeared to be a daily basis. He wasn't a part of my life, but I was clearly a big part of his. I wasn't sure what to do at first. He had never approached me or anything. My dad was in law enforcement, but I couldn't exactly go to him for advice. I decided to stop posting content on my account for a while, resolving to stay alert and keep an eye out for this guy, and just wait for everything to blow over. If things escalated, then I'd go and tell my pa. I figured this guy would get bored and leave me alone. Boy, how naive I was. A couple of weeks passed, and luckily I hadn't seen the green shirt guy around town. Guess my plan had worked. My fans were getting antsy about me not uploading new content, and my earnings were going down as a result. One weekend, my parents went off on a romantic getaway, and, hoping to ride the OnlyFans wave a little longer, I decided to take some new photos in my bedroom. Since I was home alone, there was no risk of being caught. That night, I cooked up some dinner in the kitchen, opened the window to air it out, and then went upstairs to snap the goods. After uploading the pictures, I started a live stream to apologize to my followers for my long absence. I told them it was back to business as usual. The salty dinner had made me thirsty, so during that live stream, I went downstairs to grab my water bottle in the living room, bringing my phone with me so I could continue interacting with my viewers. I was holding my phone out in front of me, completely oblivious to my surroundings, responding to my viewers' comments. I got to one, and as soon as I read it, my stomach dropped. "Hey Mellowcat, who's the man at your window?" In the video feed on my phone, in the corner of the screen, I noticed the small, blurry outline of a figure in the darkness behind me. I turned to see the man, the one who had been following me, standing outside, his gloved hands pressed up against the living room window, his face real close as he looked in at me, his dark eyes wide with excitement. I screamed and ran upstairs with my phone in my hand. I bounded into the bathroom and locked the door behind me as I called my parents. I cried to my dad that there was some guy outside our house, told him that he'd been following me for a long time. He said that they were on their way back right now, not to panic, and that my mum was already calling the cops. We didn't have any neighbours to call for help since we lived in such an isolated area, so he instructed me to run to the attic and to keep as quiet as possible until help arrived. I did as he suggested and unlocked the bathroom door. As I stepped out, I could hear quiet movements coming from the kitchen below. That's when I remembered. I had left the window open. This guy was inside my house. The access to the attic was in my parents' room, and I could already hear the guy softly calling out to me downstairs. "Hello? Mellowcat? Where are you?" He was calling to me, using my OnlyFans username. I sprinted into my parents' room and slammed the door behind me, and as I went to lock it, could hear the guy storming up my stairs. Luckily, locking the door gave me just enough time to pull down the attic's ladder and scamper up with the hook in my hand. As I climbed up, I could hear the man on the other side of the door thumping into it with all of his body weight. I pulled the ladder back up and closed the attic hatch behind me. I waited up there with my hand over my mouth as I heard the door give way. My heart was beating so fast I couldn't stop breathing heavily. Things were being thrown around and smashed in the room beneath me. All I could do was listen as the guy rampaged through my house, occasionally shouting obscenities and saying that he knew I was still in the house. This torment didn't last long, maybe only 5 minutes tops, but I felt like I was up in that attic for an eternity. The house fell silent, but I stayed up there until I heard the police sirens come rolling into our driveway. My parents weren't far behind them. During their investigation, the detectives dusted for fingerprints on the door handles. There weren't any, but there was something else. They found traces of trichloromethane. Chloroform. It must have come off a rag or off his gloved hands. The only thing missing from our house was my laptop, which had a bunch of photos of me that I hadn't released online. This guy had clearly come for the real thing, but seeing how I climbed to safety, he settled for images instead. I haven't posted anything online since, and didn't even log on to tell my followers goodbye, since I knew that he was among them. So, in the end, I came clean to my parents about what I'd been doing, and moved in with my sister in a different town for my own safety. I won't say where for obvious reasons, as Greenshirt himself could be listening. Yeah, despite having relatively clear images of the guy's face, and knowing that he must have been from the local area and one of my followers, they never found the guy. I have no idea how he got my address. I'm just thankful I went downstairs when I did, and my viewer caught the shadowy figure outside my window. Had that guy come in while I was streaming upstairs, I might not have heard him, and who knows if I'd still be here to share this story.
In September of 2020, a 20-year-old Australian university student posted a harrowing personal account to the popular social media site, Reddit. In it, she detailed the terrifying ordeal she'd been subjected to after posting intimate pictures of herself on a social media page known as OnlyFans, one involving obsessive stalking, internet loopholes, and ultimately, a clear and present threat to her life. Only through a completely anonymous throwaway account did she feel safe enough to share her story, adding that her local police force had finally taken action against the person responsible. But even then, the girl made it clear that her complaints should have been taken seriously long before she was in any imminent danger. According to the girl, the incidents all started after she moved back with her parents during the summer break. The girl was particularly excited to be home, as the family had just bought a new puppy. By all accounts, the girl was having a ball getting to know her new furry friend. But as anyone who's ever had a puppy will tell you, to say they can be erratic would be the understatement of the century. One night, the girl awoke to hear her puppy yelping at the back door. They were in the middle of potty training, but the pup didn't quite have the hang of it yet. So she climbed out of bed, put on her slippers, and went downstairs to let the dog out. She says it was as late as 2 a.m., and there didn't seem to be another soul around as she stepped down into the night. But she soon found that she wasn't entirely alone. "I saw this figure in a car," she said. "I could tell they were looking at me, but it was pitch black outside, and I couldn't make out their face. I felt a bit uneasy, but I didn't really think anything of it. Only when I go back inside, the car started up and followed me up my driveway." The terror of such an experience is undeniable, and even though the girl was so close to home, there's no denying that being out alone in the middle of the night made her very vulnerable indeed. "I was terrified," the girl added. "I sprinted back inside and locked the door, and kept an eye out for them in case they tried to break in. But as far as I know, they just backed out of our driveway and left." When she woke up the following morning, after a terrible night of restless sleep and deep concern, the girl found an envelope inside her parents' letterbox. The envelope contained not only 20 Australian dollars in cash, but also her OnlyFans username. "I thought long and hard about how he could have found my parents' address," the girl said, "and I worked out that the problems didn't start until I shared my Amazon wish list." OnlyFans and Amazon were both adamant that their security systems prevent leaks like that from taking place. However, it appeared that wasn't the issue, as third-party sellers are not bound to the same data protection laws as large multinational companies. Although she doesn't know for certain how her stalker got her address, the girl is 90% sure that they got in touch with a third-party seller and obtained her home address in that way. Whether it was money, coercion, or intimidation that caused the seller to give up the info is another question entirely, but the fact remains that it's the most likely of all explanations. After that, when I moved back to the college town where I was studying, I stopped posting content, the girl goes on to explain. But somehow my stalker still managed to track me down. The girl said she basically closed down her OnlyFans account, then started a YouTube account because of how unsafe the former felt. Her first big blogging project was due to be a shopping trip to a local mall, but when she got to her car to depart for the day, she found it had been ransacked. The vlogging camera was missing too, she said. I know, it's my fault for leaving it in the car, but I was using it the night before, and since I lived in a gated area, I didn't think I would be unsafe. Yet she added that the camera was inside of her glove box and contained an SD card with unreleased photos and videos on it. It was almost like someone knew it was there, but as bad as that was, it only got weirder from there. She eventually contacted her building security personnel, asking if they could review security camera footage from the previous few nights, and it was through this that not only did she see a man break into her car and ignore other cars in the parking lot, but she also had proof she was being deliberately singled out for targeted harassment. After they got the camera, they walked around the duplex until stopping near my window, the girl wrote. My bedroom faces an outside street and the blinds are broken, so it's very easy to see in. I have a curtain, but it doesn't cover my window all the way. Look, what I'm trying to say is, this person watched me sleep for an hour or so. I have no idea why they didn't try to break in, but thank God they didn't. The woman explained her camera was later recovered at a nearby secondhand store, suggesting whoever is stalking her has a prior history of criminality. However, she added that the camera's memory card was missing. I know he kept it as some kind of trophy, I just know it, she added, and has since moved and hopes her stalker hasn't followed. I believe the police are still trying to track them down, but I have broken my lease and moved to a new place, so hopefully this will keep me safe. But what's so scary about the girl's story is that it seems like only a matter of time before this stalker decides to take things further. Unless they're caught, stalkers will only ever escalate their activities until their obsession reaches a deadly and permanent end.